All right, Isaiah Hole, the host of the LockedOn podcast for the Michigan Wolverines, joining us now. Isaiah, just kind of give me an idea. What does the feel like up in Ann Arbor right now? What kind of sense are you gaining from fans? Is there optimism? Is there hope that this could finally be the year that all of the heartache ends? What are you kind of feeling right now?
Well, I think that there's definitely, you're starting to sense a little bit from the fans that they feel like there is an opportunity. I think it depends, right? Because you have a couple different factions of the fan base. You have those who are doom and gloom and think that Michigan's defense has been awful all year, even though it hasn't been, and think that the pass defense has been awful all year, though it hasn't been, and just see absolute doom happening. The recency bias after watching what Ohio State just did to Michigan State. All of those things kind of play into some fans' fears. Then you have others that are going to be absolute homers in general and just kind of be like, yeah, I mean, we were going to win this game no matter what anyway. And then in the middle, you've got people who are just kind of in wait and see mode. As far as the team itself, what I think is interesting is like you are certainly sensing a level of confidence, not really a braggadocio. I know some are taking Cade McNamara's comments out of context to kind of make it sound like it was like him saying that there's nothing to be concerned about when it comes to Ohio State's defense when he said he's unconcerned about it. It's more of he's confident that the offense is going to have a good game plan, that they're going to be able to do some of the things that they've done all year. Certainly after playing Wisconsin, I think that you can credit them that, right? Because I think Wisconsin is the top defense in the conference at least. And they were able to do those things. But I'm certainly sensing a confidence coming out of Schembechler Hall. And I think it starts with Cade and Aiden Hutchinson, who told us at the media availability on Tuesday that we're not going to come out and play this game scared. He said, I've looked back at film. I've seen some of these other defenses play Ohio State's offense, and they had kind of a fearful, scared, timid type of way of playing against Ohio State. And he said, that's not going to be us. Like, we know that we can win this game. And he's as he said, I'm not saying that we will win this game. I'm saying that I know that we can. And they've maintained the last couple of years that the reasons why those have been blowouts have been not due to this giant talent gap, which I do think that there is a talent gap. I don't think it's necessarily as wide as the scores represented. I think it was a lack of execution, bad game plans, things of that nature. And they feel like with Mike McDonald being the new defensive coordinator, the types of things that they've been able to do offensively all year, they've been kind of peaking at the right time as well offensively. There's certainly a feeling like if we go out and play Michigan football, and they have said this, that we'll be able to come away with a win. I'm curious to see if that's true, because I'm not 100% certain that it is, but at the same time, who picked this Michigan team to be ranked number 5 at 10-1 going into the final regular season game against Ohio State? If anyone would have said that before the season, you would have been labeled as the ultimate homer, that you have no idea what you're talking about. You got to take off the maize and blue glasses. But yet here they are. That's exactly where they're at.
I think I have kind of fallen into that trap as well. I mean, listen, I didn't think there was any chance that this team would be in that position. They are, and I think Jim Harbaugh gets a lot of credit for it. As you know, I have been as hard on Jim Harbaugh as anybody has been. And I think most of it rightfully so. But I think at the same point, he also should get a lot of credit for what has happened this year. Mm-hmm. I think everybody is looking at this game as a legacy type thing. Do you think it's that important for Jim Harbaugh? Do you think this is the kind of a legacy defining thing? If he can finally go beat Ohio State, there's nothing else that anybody can say to him if he gets this done this week?
Yeah, because it gives you everything that you've needed. And it doesn't matter that it's taken you 7 years. It's just because I think then finally some of those things hasn't been able to do it. I think you look at 2016 in a different light. I mean, I know that people that are pro Michigan do, but I think nationally you would look at that and say, well, look at how close they were in 2016 and 2017. And even though 2017 wasn't a good year, but they were close to Ohio State in that game. But suddenly you would have that trip to Indianapolis. You would probably be playing Wisconsin again and be favored to win. You would have that opportunity to go to the college football playoff. And considering everything that he's faced this offseason, the fact that he resigned, certainly the contract is more favorable to Michigan. People kind of say, well, he makes half the amount of money. That's not exactly right, because incentives would get him to exactly where his salary was beforehand, in which he would hit some of those things. So you'd have to imagine he's certainly driven, right? Because he wins this game, he gets back millions of dollars that he wouldn't have had otherwise, right? Who isn't going to put everything out there when you have millions of dollars literally on the line like that? I think this game is more important to Michigan, and that might seem weird to say because, I mean, they've lost so many in the last 2 decades. Ohio State certainly prioritizes the rivalry, but I think just with everything that happened in the lead up to the season, to when you look at how last year went, his contract, how meaningful it would be to Michigan in this particular instance, the fact that they've actually prioritized Ohio State in ways that they haven't done before, things of that nature. I think it's so much more important to Michigan because Ohio State, they do this every year. They get to go to Indy. They get to go to the college football playoff. It's kind of become routine for them. For Michigan, it's been since 2004 since they've even won a Big Ten title. So, and they lost to Ohio State that year, no less. So I think this is a more important game for Michigan because suddenly it changes the narrative. And there's a lot of people out there, from the Paul Feinbaums to anyone who's picking this game, I guess myself included, that are saying that Michigan's going to lose this game. And if you come away with a win and you finish the regular season 11-1, you're going to Indianapolis. Suddenly, all of those things that you've been saying about Jim Harbaugh, not you personally, but just people out there have been saying about Jim Harbaugh, it turns on its head.
I totally agree. I think I think calling it a narrative changing game is very appropriate for what this Saturday is. Who do you think is the most important player for Michigan this weekend? If they're going to get this thing done, who's the most important player on the field? Offense, defense, special teams, whatever it is. Who do you think that would be?
I think it would have to be Aiden Hutchinson because he's the game wrecker. And the kind of coupled with him, it also has to be David Ojabo because if Aiden is taking on double teams, which he certainly most likely will be, then David Ojabo is going to have to come up big. But it's really that duo. Because the most important thing in this entire game for Michigan is to get C.J. Stroud off of his spot, make him uncomfortable. We've seen with Nebraska and Penn State, when they were able to do that, suddenly that formidable passing offense is not nearly as formidable. So it's going to be incumbent upon him, particularly Aiden, I say partially because he's the team captain. He's kind of the one that the team rallies around. I would say he's the emotional leader of the team, at least on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's most important for him to have the game of his life. He says he's going to lay it literally all out there because he knows it's the last game in the big house. He knows what this game means. It's also a legacy game for him too, right? He came back, he said, because of he needed to play in this game one more time. He really only had one start against Ohio State in his sophomore year. So it's we'll see how that ends up playing out. But if he can't get home because Ohio State is paying him that much close attention, then that means that it opens up opportunities for David Ojabo. And really, I mean, this is the best pass rush that Ohio State theoretically has seen, right? And if they struggled against Nebraska, they struggled against a very good Penn State front. Certainly there's a capability for Michigan to do just as much, if not more. And that could change the entire game. That could, if you're suddenly putting them in situations where they can't pass the ball because CJ Stroud is running for his life, then it's kind of a great equalizer.
I brought up that point a couple times to people. I think there's so much talk about Michigan's defensive ends. I think the only thing that Ohio State does probably better than anybody that Michigan's faced is they have the ability to use their quick game to kind of negate those defensive ends. They can throw it out to Chris Olave. They can throw it to Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. They can get the ball out quick. Let those guys go. So I'm thinking Michigan's secondary is probably the most valuable part of the same. We know that the defensive ends they're going to wreak havoc. That's what they do. That's why I think it puts a lot of pressure on the secondary because they're going to have to cover that quick screen game, things like that, and obviously the running game as well. How does Cade McNamara? How do you think he's progressed throughout this year? I mean, he took a lot of flack all throughout the year. I mean, there were people calling for J.J. McCarthy here. That stuff has been come around. But how much do you think he's progressed throughout the year?
I think quite a bit. And then, granted, I think he got a lot of flack because Michigan wasn't passing the ball. It wasn't that they were not capable of passing the ball. They just weren't doing it. And I know that I think part of it was because of that Washington game when he didn't have a good game on top of the fact that they weren't passing the ball. You know, it was what, 9 of 15 passes or something like that. So it didn't look very good. And he caught all kinds of flack for those reasons. But then when they started asking him to pass the ball more against Wisconsin a little bit, you felt really confident against Nebraska that when it was a 3rd and long, he was going to complete the ball. And then it kind of comes full circle against Michigan State. I understand Michigan State's got the worst pass defense in the country, but still, I mean, you have to execute. And he's starting to really look like a gamer, right? Because you put him out there against Penn State, and he's making these perfect throws. I mean, all 3 touchdowns those weren't easy throws to make. Even that underneath throw to Eric All, we've seen some of those types of throws get, doink off of someone else's helmet. There's nothing you can really do about that if a guy just kind of gets high when you're trying to see the field. But needled those 2 touchdowns into Roman Wilson, and I think he seems to like he plays bigger and better in the bigger games, right? It wasn't his fault that Michigan lost against Michigan State. He really kind of put the team on his back. If they could have just done one thing defensively, stopped Kenneth Walker one time, game's completely different, So it's I think that you'd imagine, based off of what you've seen from him so far this year, considering like the bigger the game is, the better he seems to be, that he's going to have to come out and do the same, but probably exponential against Ohio State. I think he's prepared for that, but easier said than done. But I think that just kind of across the board, everyone's going to have to play the game of their life, because this is really just such a tough team that Michigan's going to be playing. They can't be like 2019, when I thought Shea Patterson was having a great game, but it looked good on paper. It would have been even better if he wasn't let down by a lot of the receivers, right? There was a stretch where there was eight dropped passes. And if you're Cade, you better hope those receivers come and play with that same type of mentality and that same type of gamesmanship that we've seen from him so far.
The defense also did not play well in 2018 or 2019, to be honest, against Ohio State. So I think those are obviously big things. And then also I think, the running backs have to take, and the offensive line have to take a little bit of pressure off Cade McNamara. It's going to be interesting to see how they use Donovan Edwards. If Blake Corum is back healthy and is going to be able to play, how do you use Donovan Edwards? He obviously had a breakout week last week. Quickly, before we let you go, tell people how they can access and get all your content that you've turned out for the week.
You can find the bulk of it over at wolverineswire.usatoday.com. You can listen to the podcast at LockedOn Wolverines podcast, which you can find on YouTube as well as anywhere you get your podcasts.
Isaiah, thanks, man.
Absolutely. My pleasure.